many people recording today. You can also watch us live on Facebook.
Good afternoon, Amber. My name is Juan, and I'm going to be the interpreter.
Yeah, can you tell me what email address you used to join the meeting?
Torres J 1856.
Okay.
My name on the participant is Juan Torres.
I'm going to update you there. Okay, great. Juan, you have some interference happening right now. It's a little better. It's still there though. I think we're just going to have to accept it as it is. It's good enough. We'll just continue. You sound good. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to let the participants in and we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Amber Sobosly and I am involved with NBOP Petaluma. I am one of the organizers for the North Bay Organizing Project. And one of the things we do when it's election season is we host forums to listen to what the candidates have to say about the election that's coming up and the office that they're running for. So I am just going to take a quick minute right now while everyone's coming in and joining the meeting and we're getting started to go over a few of the technical logistics, and then I'll pass it off to the moderators for the event. So we will be asking 12 questions tonight, and we'll also be asking a few polls. So those of you participating by Zoom, you can go ahead and answer the poll question when we get to that section. We will be having Spanish interpretation today. So para interpretación en español, visite el video en YouTube in tinyurl.com/Project-Petaluma. So now I just want to take a minute to introduce the concept of language justice. And this is one of the things that NBOP works on. So what is language justice? When we refer to language justice, we mean the right that everyone has to communicate in the language in which we feel most comfortable. In multilingual communities around the world, such as Petaluma, dialogue across language difference is only possible through the use of strategies to bridge differences in language. And that's why we are hosting this event as a bilingual event in English and Spanish. And this is one of the things that NBOP always does as a way to be more inclusive of all of the community members who live here. Let's see, I have just a few more things that I want to point out. One of them is that in support of the language justice, I want to remind the candidates and the question askers, the moderators, and anyone else that's going to be speaking tonight to remember to enunciate your words clearly and to not speak too quickly. This allows time for our interpreter to do a good job. So we appreciate your help in supporting that work and this approach to language justice. We won't be having any live questions from the audience tonight. We used a format where we accepted questions in advance, and those have been incorporated into the questions that we're asking. And so I just want everyone to know that the chat box will be closed, and the majority of the content will just be what's provided by those hosting the event. So thanks again for joining us. And with that, I would like to pass it over to Elena.
Thanks, Amber. Tonight, we will begin by acknowledging that we gather on the traditional land of the Lekatuit Nation and the coastal Miwok. We offer our respect to the Lekatuit Nation and the coastal Miwok people, first and foremost by acknowledging the suffering they have undergone when European immigrants arrived to their lands. We are so grateful for the opportunity to be guests here tonight.
Thank you, Elena. Hello, everyone, and welcome this evening. My name is Sierra Lewitter, pronouns she, her, hers, with NBOP, and I'm also a longtime Sonoma County resident and a mother. I recently got involved in community organizing after realizing that I wanted to change the narrative in my head, that nothing I do will change the way things are. But it is community organizations and volunteers like the ones present this evening that come together to create lasting and impactful change. So thank you for being here this evening.
And my name is Elena Sullivan. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am here tonight on behalf of NBOP. I am a resident here in Petaluma, a small business owner, and a mother of two. I believe that seemingly small actions like showing up here tonight for this forum can truly be the foundation for global change. And now the chair of NBOP Petaluma, Erin Chmielewski, will introduce the ethos of the North Bay Organizing Project to give you a more intimate idea of the organization hosting tonight's forum.
Hi, good evening. My name is Erin Chmielewski, pronouns she, her. Thank you everyone for being here and trusting us. NBOP is a grassroots, multiracial, and multi-issue organization comprised of over 22 faith, environmental, labor, student, and community-based organizations in Sonoma County. And we seek to build a regional power organization that's rooted in working class and minority communities in the North Bay, uniting people to build leadership and grassroots power for social, economic, racial, and environmental justice. And now I want to share a message from NBOP's Executive Committee Vice President Zaira Garcia. Intersectionality is complex, but connected to racial inequalities and all isms, to simply put it. This was from a mother in Petaluma, quoted, "My high school senior says that Black Lives Matter peaceful protests have made her feel safer in Petaluma, and that it is reassuring to know that so many people are looking out for the minority citizens in this town. I thought that maybe all the focus on racial justice was making my kids feel uncomfortable, but both my Black teens say that it's a good thing. They're happy to see people speaking out and speaking up. Overall, we as NBOP, we want BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, families to feel safe in our schools, in our communities where they live, work, and have the right to exist, to be seen and to be heard. And our intent for this forum is to center BIPOC families and to add racial awareness that our council has failed to address or bring to the table during decisions. And thank you again, everybody. Pass it back to Elena.
Thank you, Erin. Petaluma will be electing 3 city council members on November 3rd. Tonight, we will start by inviting each candidate to give an introductory statement in alphabetical order, followed by our questions, which are organized under 4 sections representing NBOP's core values: roots, roof, refuge, and community. Candidates will be selected to answer these questions in a random order. These questions were written by the NBOP Petaluma in collaboration with the co-sponsors of the forum: North Bay LGBTQIA Families, Indivisible Petaluma, Sonoma County Commission on Human Rights, No Gas Here, Bike Petaluma, Friends of the Petaluma River, The Raucous Rooster, Sunrise Movement Sonoma County, Petaluma Tide, and 350 Petaluma. Other than our questions for introductory statements this evening, the candidates were not provided with any questions beforehand.
Thank you. And finally, each candidate will give a closing statement before we end at 8:30 tonight. Since we have 12 questions and 7 of the 8 candidates with us, Mike Healy was unfortunately unable to attend this evening. We ask that candidates please keep their responses as well as their introductory and closing statements to 45 seconds. Sheila Morrissey, if you could also give a wave again, of NBOP will be our timekeeper this evening. Candidates will need to switch to gallery view so that they can see her each time they begin to answer a question, so that they can see the time limit prompts from Sheila, which I will go over one more time. She will flash a yellow card, as she's doing right now, when you have 15 seconds left. So that will be at 30 seconds. And a red card when your time is up. As moderators and as well as tech, Elena and I will we'll mute you if you have gone over your time. Thank you.
For the candidate introductions this evening, we're going to do something a little bit different. As the introductions, we asked each candidate to come prepared with the answers to the following questions. Why do Black Lives matter to you? And how do you show that Black Lives matter? We will begin tonight in alphabetical order, starting with Brian Barnacle, followed by Robert Conklin. All yours, Brian.
Thank you and good evening. Thanks to North Bay Organizing Project and all of the organizations who contributed. Black Lives matter to me because they have an entirely different experience than I do in the world and in our communities. And our institutions are rooted in racism. And as leaders, we have the opportunity to address that, and we should. And if I'm elected, I will. In terms of how I show it, I try my best to listen to people. I try my best to outwardly express my support, and I do what I can to show up, whether that's showing up to a county board of supervisors meeting for renters' rights, or showing up for a city council meeting to oppose purchasing semi-automatic rifles during a pandemic.
Thank you so much, Brian. And up next, we will have Robert Conklin. Go ahead, Robert.
Hello, thank you for having me tonight. I listened to, or I read that first question, and me being a union member of my whole life, when I'm at work, I'm equal to everybody, no matter what color you are. What I want to know is how come when we get off work, we're no longer equal. I won the coin flip being a white male. I have opportunities that some people less fortunate than I have, that people, maybe with a different skin color don't have the opportunities I have. The best tool in your toolbox is.
Thank you, Robert. And up next, we'll have Gabe Kearney, followed by Susan Kirks. Go ahead, Gabe.
Good evening. Thank you for hosting this forum this evening. My name is Gabe Kearney. I currently serve on the Petaluma City Council and have for the past 9 years. It is my hope that I get to serve 4 more years serving this wonderful community. I think that Black Lives Matter because I don't think that your skin color should determine your outcome in life. It should not determine your sentencing if you are convicted of a crime. It should not determine whether or not you have the right access to schools or different opportunities to advance in the future. I listen and try and hear what other folks have to say and fold that into my lived experience as a Mexican-American male growing up here in Sonoma County, and use that to formulate how I vote and so represent the people of Petaluma. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. And Susan, you're up next, followed by Kathy Miller.
Thank you, and thank you to NBOP for organizing this evening. Black Lives Matter to me because the time is long overdue to stop killing Black people at the hands of police violence, to recognize and elevate job opportunities, economic vitality, housing, fresh food, clean air, clean water through actions of environmental justice. The 1619 Project I support teaching in all of our schools and would like to see this come to Petaluma. The climate crisis hand in hand with equity and creating a safer and more inviting community for Black, Indigenous, and people of color are what we need in Petaluma, and it's a primary reason that I'm in this election effort. I don't have too much more time, so maybe I can say later what I...
Thank you, Susan. And up next, we'll have Kathy Miller, followed by Dennis Pocekay, followed by Lizzie Wallack. So take it away, Kathy.
Good evening. Thank you to North Bay Organizing Project for putting on this forum and all the co-sponsors. It's my pleasure to be here. I have been on the Petaluma City Council for the last 8 years, and I hope to get another 4 years. In terms of answering your questions, you know, we have a history of systemic racism in this country. It's been going on for a long time. It continues to exist. And, you know, we need to recognize it and address the issue as best we can. We should mean it when we say all people are created equal. In terms of what I'm doing to show that Black Lives Matter, as a council member, I've supported listening circles. I'm looking forward to hearing what.
Thank you, Kathy. And Dennis, go ahead. Hope you're muted, Dennis.
Thanks. Black lives matter to me because they have not mattered since the first African slave was brought to this country in chains. They matter to me because I've listened closely to the voices of Black people, and I'm not willing to be complicit in their continuing oppression. And they matter to me because none of us are truly free when Black people can be killed because of the color of their skin. I show that Black Lives Matter by getting out of my home to attend rallies and marches and council meetings. I speak publicly when asked. I educate myself by reading and listening closely to Black voices. And finally, I recruited a campaign team that's willing to call me out if and when needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And Lizzie, you're up next.
Thank you very much. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter in particular right now, because all lives do not yet matter in this country. This is a discussion of humanity. This has been going on for hundreds of years, and I want to be a part of the change. The time for change is now. This is why I'm here today. As a Jewish mother of 2 small children, I understand firsthand that representation matters. Fresh voices matter. We need leadership who understand that hundreds of years of racism is what our policies and decision-making have left folks out. We need leadership who will acknowledge how deep this oppression runs and how complex and interconnected it is. We need leadership who put this on the forefront to listen, learn, try, and try harder.
Thank you, Lizzie, and thank you so much to all the candidates. We will now begin our first set of questions this evening. They will be rooted in environmental justice. Roots represents NBOP's commitment to environmental justice, to addressing and healing the impacts of climate change on the health and safety of our community, and to upholding the rights of nature to be protected from human forces. Climate events like the wildfires that have affected Sonoma County in the past 4 years cause the greatest harm to those who are most vulnerable, including our elders, our immigrant communities, renters, and communities of color. The following questions address how candidates will take action to combat climate change and prioritize communities' health and safety in these efforts. Caitlin Quinn, one of our Petaluma City Schools trustees, will now ask 3 questions about environmental justice. Caitlin, question
Great,
1.
thank you, Sarah. So this question, I'll repeat it after I read it once. It's a long one. Where does Petaluma's Climate Emergency Action Framework fit into the decisions that you would be making as a council member? In your answer, please address the Petaluma River Basin and sea level rise or emergency preparedness connected to climate change. Again, where does Petaluma's Climate Emergency Action Framework fit into the decisions you would be making as a city council member? And in your answer, please address the Petaluma River Basin and sea level rise or emergency preparedness and how it's connected to climate change.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, we will be starting with Dennis Pocekay, followed by Susan Kirks. Dennis, you're up.
Sorry, thank you. Last week, I volunteered in a shelter. I saw the devastating personal impact of the climate crisis. Petaluma is not immune to wildfires. The council must take all steps necessary to mitigate this danger and ensure that our plan is effectively communicated to all residents, including non-English speakers. The climate emergency also requires that we approach the challenge on a systems level, not in a piecemeal way, and that every department of city government must own the challenge. The Climate Commission must be fully funded in order to be able to educate and engage our community, and climate justice must be an integral part of all efforts. Finally, the Commission's framework report must be fully incorporated into the new general plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. Susan Kirks, followed by Brian Barnacle. Susan.
Thank you. The climate action plan that we're working on will be coming before the council for approval, probably with the new city leaders that our voters will elect. And we have an interface or intersection with the general plan that we're beginning, which is the plan to help us create the community that we want on every level going forward. So we need to be aware and sensitive to the context of equity in every decision we make related to the climate emergency. That also includes taking care of our natural areas. It includes ensuring as we create a community that.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, Brian Barnacle, followed by Gabe Kearney. Brian.
Thank you. In terms of how environmental justice fits into our climate emergency framework, it absolutely, I agree with the previous speakers, it needs to be central to it. Sea level rise is coming, and the sea level rise models that I've seen show somewhere between 2 to 5 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century. We are going to be dealing with disasters and frequently, and as we've seen, the people who get hit hardest are the people who can afford it the least. And it's going to be, seeing the PG&E, the PG&E settlement data was really. I'll finish it later. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Brian. Gabe Kearney, followed by Kathy Miller. Gabe.
Thank you, Sierra. My day-to-day job is to work on disaster response for the state of California. This past weekend, I spent the day in Pescadero meeting with people that have lost their home from the wildfire. So I have a direct understanding of the impacts that these fires and different disasters have on folks. As far as the framework, we need to incorporate it into our general plan and how we move forward as a city. And I look forward to that implementation. When it comes to the increase in sea level and the impact on our tidal slough or tidal river in Petaluma, we do need to look into the projections and how we can best plan going forward for development along the riverfront. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Miller, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Kathy.
Thank you. So absolutely, the climate emergency action framework has to be incorporated into our general plan. We are beginning the general plan process, and you know, we obviously have to look at that. We also have to look at sea level rise as part of our general plan, because as Councilmember Kearney said, it impacts our development in the areas adjacent to the river. We want Petaluma to be a river-facing community, but we obviously have to be careful with that and plan accordingly. You know, I have volunteered in the shelters during each of the fires over the last several years, and it's right. The people who are the least able to afford it, you know, are the ones that are in the shelter, and we have to take care of.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, Lizzie Miller, followed by Robert Conklin.
Lizzie Wallack. Thank you. That's okay. I absolutely am in 100% favor of our climate action framework linking up with the update of the general plan. And to take it one step further, I would say that we really need to be looking at a more frequent update of both our climate action plan and our general plan. If we can learn anything from 3 years ago to where we are today, is that the clock is ticking very fast. Things are changing incredibly quickly, and we need to start to get ahead of it and be more prepared. And lessening the timeline on these updates will be a huge change to implement. We also absolutely have to be looking at all development and transportation moving forward through this lens of climate emergency. We cannot develop outside of our urban growth boundary. We cannot develop with needing two cars to get to every home. I'll finish later.
Thank you, Lizzie Wallack. Robert Conklin, you were up.
Yes, we definitely have to implement the climate action into our general plan. Projects moving forward, we need to build the cleanest, most environmentally friendly, using, you know, renewable building materials, and, you know, get the best green energy solutions for those buildings. With the sea level rise, we need to really look at where we're building, especially close to the river, and make sure that it's going to be able to not be underwater in 100 years. And that's it.
Thank you. Back to Caitlin for question number 2.
Great. How should the city change its zoning ordinances so that businesses built near schools, care facilities, and homes do not expose sensitive receptors, such as children, to toxics? So how should the city change its zoning ordinances so that businesses built near schools, care facilities, and homes do not expose sensitive receptors, such as children, to toxics?
Thank you. All right, we will be beginning this question with Lizzie Wallack, followed by Brian Barnacle. Lizzie.
Thank you so much. So 2 points that I would like to make about this moving forward is the importance of a frequent general plan update, as I started to mention before, that we can't, 15 years is too long to project ahead 15 years and figure out where we're going to be, because as we know, things are changing quickly and we need to have flexibility to make updates sooner. We also need to have more voices at the table when we're implementing zoning ordinances at where businesses can be and can't be. And I think that that's a huge part of this general plan update, is outreach to community members, getting the word out and getting more voices to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Brian Barnacle, followed by Kathy Miller. Brian.
Yeah, it feels like it's as simple as a simple policy of defining what chemicals and things that we don't want to put our children near, and establishing an ordinance that says that we're not going to do it. I 100% agree with what Lizzie just said, that we need to be more agile in the way we implement our general plan. But I think more importantly than the policies that we get in the general plan is having leaders who actually implement the general plan and don't overrule it at every turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, Kathy Miller, followed by Susan Kirks. Kathy.
Thank you. So we have implemented a moratorium on gas stations in town, which is one of the things that the current city council has done to prevent kids and elders and people from being exposed to toxins in their neighborhoods. Again, you know, as part of a general plan update, we look at zoning and land use, and that's a big part of it. And so, you know, we will go out like we did the last time we did a general plan update to the community and have these discussions with the community. And I look forward to participating in those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, Susan Kirks, followed by Gabe Kearney. Susan.
Thank you. I'm learning quickly what 45 seconds means. First of all, I'd like to say that the Safeway gas station should never have been approved. And I truly admire the group that sustained through that and has filed the lawsuit. We need leadership in our community because this relates to environmental justice. It relates to planning. It relates to identifying that we simply will not be locating gas stations or other toxic generators near sensitive areas, schools, homes with children. And it can be addressed through zoning changes. And of course, the general plan's been mentioned, but this is something that need leadership in our city and our community.
Thank you. Susan, oh, excuse me. Gabe Kearney, followed by Robert Conklin. Gabe.
Thank you. The perfect example of this was the gas station that Safeway wanted to build. And I unfortunately made my disgust and displeasure for that project known in an email to a constituent. And during a Freedom of Information Act request, that email was made public and prevented me from then participating in the process going forward. We should not put gas stations across the street or anywhere near preschools that serve our poorest members of our community. And that's what happened at Safeway, and it's disgusting. And I will continue to make sure that in the future that does not happen. Our moratorium on gas stations is one step towards that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Robert Conklin, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Robert.
2 years ago, I actually signed the petition for the gas station. So if I were to be elected, they'd probably have me step down, in my opinion. I don't really understand how that even got to where it is, other than the fact that they kind of exploited their commercial boundaries. The company strong-armed their way into it and exploited every loophole, which is disgusting. All the members who signed the petition's names were, posted on the internet for all to see, so they could be intimidated. Those kind of tactics need not be we need not stand for those from any council member, and we should stop that kind of corporate bullying. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, Dennis Pocekay, take it away.
Thanks. I think that the main thing is that our zoning does have to be more flexible in the new general plan. We need to make more options available in every way and count on the council to pursue the intent of the plan. I also agree that the general plan needs to be updated on a more frequent basis. Because if you go through the last general plan, you see that we've really accomplished very little of what we set out to accomplish in that plan. I think we wasted some effort in that regard. And finally, in relation to toxics, I believe the council did not ever want the Safeway gas station, but that elected to set up roadblocks instead of just saying no, and eventually painted themselves into a corner where they had to approve it.
Thank you, Dennis. All right, we'll go back to Caitlin for our third question.
All right, good job, everyone, keeping it under 45 seconds. I would not be able to do that. When planning new transportation infrastructure that emphasizes alternatives to driving, what steps will you take to ensure safety for bicyclists and pedestrians? So, when planning new transportation infrastructure that emphasizes alternatives to driving, what steps will you take to ensure safety for bicyclists and pedestrians?
Thank you, Caitlin. All right, we will be starting this question with Gabe Kearney, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Gabe.
As we move forward with improvements to our transportation infrastructure, including improving our streets, expanding our transit system, we do need to factor in how people make that last mile from their home to the transit station or to the train station, as well as how they get around on their bikes or just walking, and continue to improve upon the infrastructure in our community to make it safer for everyone to be able to access our streets, no matter what method they use. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Pocekay, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Dennis.
Yeah. In my vision for Petaluma, biking and walking are extremely important. We simply have to get cars off the road. Biking infrastructure costs less than auto infrastructure, and improving it will increase ridership and rider safety. We need to fast track the Fifth Street Bicycle Boulevard as a model for others. I think that the local biking community should be the critical resource in fitting best practices to the realities of biking in Petaluma. And we still need to improve our public transit system to help both walkers and bikers get to where they're going.
Thank you, Dennis. Lizzie Wallack, followed by Kathy Miller. Lizzie?
Thank you very much. Yes, so increasing bike and pedestrian safety, definitely focusing on repairs to roads and sidewalks, including bike lanes, speeds of cars traveling on roads, bike boulevards. Also looking at smaller electrical public transportation fleets to get massive buses off the road that are not being utilized efficiently. And then also, transportation is so intertwined with the development of housing and economic development that we really must be looking at the deeper look at the local and the neighborhood to make sure that we can get folks out of cars onto bikes and foot and be able to meet their needs on the day-to-day for jobs, services, goods, schools, etc.
Thank you. Kathy Miller, followed by Robert Conklin. Kathy.
Thanks. So I could probably talk about transportation for an hour, but I'll try and keep within the 45 seconds. One of the things that's on the ballot is what is an extension of our county self-help transportation tax. And in that, there is 35% of that is going to bicycle and pedestrian and transit. And that's a much higher percentage than the last iteration of it. And then we've also got 65% going to local roads. So it's all interrelated. Safe streets make for safe bicycling. Added funding for bike and ped is really important, and transit, so we can electrify our system. And then another big thing that I have pushed for and will continue to push for is improvements to the Lynch Creek Trail.
Thank you. Robert Conklin next, followed by Susan Kirks. Robert.
Well, I just lost a good friend in a bicycle accident on Corona. We definitely need a safe option to get east to west, west to east. For bicyclists, bicyclists and cars don't really mix, especially with today's distracted driving, and we got to make it as safe as possible. The new building would definitely should be transit oriented around smart. Understandably, we can't really pick and choose where it gets built, but we need to definitely focus on transit-based development.
Thank you. Susan Kirks, followed by Brian Barnacle.
Thank you. As one of your new elected officials, I would definitely reach out to and listen to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. This is one of the hardest working, most informed committees of all of our committees and commissions. I would listen to the members and ask them what their priorities were and how they feel we could make things safer. Also, Bike-Petaluma has a really deep expertise in the area of bicycle safety. I was looking at recently some safety measures internationally, and I really like Copenhagen, what some of their relationship between bike lanes and streets are to protect bicyclists. And lastly, since we only have 45 seconds, we need to definitely improve safety with the Caulfield connector, which I think many of us support over Rainier, and Corona really needs improvements. Thank you.
Brian Barnacle, you're up.
Yeah. This is not just about a future with bikes and pedestrians. There's thousands of people in our town that can't afford a car and that are relying on their feet. The fact that we have the worst roads in the Bay Area is itself an environmental justice issue that our council is overseeing. In terms of what I would do, I would make sure that the word safety is represented in the transportation section of our environmental documents, unlike the current council. This is probably one of the areas where the current council has been most negligent, is in making sure that our streets are safe. People are dying within the project sphere of influence, and they don't make sure that the word safety is mentioned. It's absolutely essential that we start taking safety more seriously.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you to Caitlin and all of the candidates. We will now be shifting to Erin, who will introduce our first poll of the evening. Erin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again. So I'm going to be sharing my screen real quick here, and we're going to go ahead and just take a look at this poll here. So our first one is, how are you most impacted by climate change in Petaluma? You know, that means a lot of different things for everybody. Location, priorities, families, other things that are going on in your life. So we're hoping with this poll, you can choose what primary concern you have, whether it's wildfire danger, smoke, extreme heat events, drought, flood, displacement, destruction of property, and or loss of income. I know there are quite a few other things that are probably, you know, a worry for others, but you know, hopefully we can kind of get an idea in our community what are the primary ones that stand out. And we'll run this poll for just a couple more seconds and get as many people as we can to vote.
This is Amber just jumping in to say we're still getting people responding. So I think take a few more seconds.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, Erin. We will now shift into our next set of questions pertaining to housing justice. As Sonoma County continues to face a housing crisis, Ruth speaks to our understanding of housing as a human right. Rapidly rising rents and an extremely low vacancy rate has increasingly left tenants and low-wage earners at risk of housing instability and displacement. NBOP works with tenants as part of the Sonoma County Tenant Union to lead tenants' right workshops and advocate for access to truly affordable housing. The following questions address how candidates will support housing justice. Blake Hooper, who sits on the City of Petaluma Planning Commission, will now ask 3 questions about housing justice. Thanks, Blake.
Thank you, Elena. The first question is, what is one example of a non-market-based solution to the housing crisis? This question might seem radical, but let's think outside the box. That is, what is one example of a non-market-based solution to the housing crisis? This question might seem radical, but we'll hope you think outside the box. Thank you.
And we'll start this question with Susan Kirks, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. To be honest, I'm not really sure I understand the question. Is there a way to clarify what you mean by a non-market solution? No?
I can jump in. This is Amber. Sheila, you want to go ahead and stop the timer? We'll just take a minute to clarify. Typically, I'll give an example of a market-based solution. One of the things that the City Council currently does is they set aside a certain percentage of housing for low-income housing. But that's based on the market. And so we're looking for ways to think outside of the market. And you know, it's up to you for interpretation. This is something that tenants unions are working on. And so it's an opportunity for you to share your knowledge with us about what people outside of city government might be doing when they're thinking about housing solutions.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Thank you for that clarification. I guess the way that I would respond to the question is that I would be looking for housing that's affordable, which could mean it's important to have some form of authority to be able to guide us for elected officials to make decisions. And we need to be looking at any solution that's possible, from an affordable housing authority to changes in zoning to prioritizing affordable housing that's lower than market rate in order to provide housing for people, because housing is a right and it's a really important.
Thank you, Susan. And up next we have Lizzie Wallack, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Go ahead, Lizzie.
Thank you. Yes, I think that, you know, first and foremost, we could start talking about impact fees and ways to create incentives to get projects going. And I think that if we can start to have that conversation between the city and developers, we could start to create relationships to really start to get some traction. I also think that we can be much more creative in how we're thinking about housing and what that means. So when we actually look at the design and construction materiality, location of housing types, what traditionally has been done and is absolutely not working, and how we can start to alter and shift new models for future success. Thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie. Dennis, we have you up next, followed by Brian Barnacle. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, I suppose the first place I would go in a not a perfect world, but somewhere close to that, is to an affordable housing bond issued. Alameda County did this 4 years ago. The cost to the property owners is $15 per $100,000 of assessed valuation, not market value, but assessed valuation. And in 4 years, they've started multiple projects with this funding. I'm also encouraged because I read something from the county recently that says they're going to start talking about this again. I think that's one place we need to look very hard.
Thank you, Dennis. And Brian, you're up next, followed by Robert Conklin.
I struggle with non-market-based solutions because my head is very much focused in the market-based solutions first. I'll be honest with that. I think that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in if you, well, I think that I agree that housing is a right. I think that if people, especially for anyone who is working full-time and can't afford housing, that we need to create housing opportunities for people that are non-market, you know, or that allow them to live in a healthy life. And yeah, I'm gonna struggle with this one.
Thank you, Brian. And Robert, you're up next, followed by Kathy Miller. Go ahead, Robert.
I mean, I guess the city could donate some land if we have any to maybe build some modest income apartment buildings or something to help our most vulnerable citizens. You know, one of the things I was talking about when we have to renew the lease on the fairgrounds was maybe bringing City Hall onto that property and using the City Hall property for senior apartments or you know, something like that. And okay.
Thank you, Robert. And Kathy, you're up next, followed by Gabe Kearney. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thanks. So examples of non-market-based housing that we're already doing in the city of Petaluma include projects with PEP, Eaton Housing, Burbank Housing, and the Sonoma Land Trust. And we partner with those nonprofit developers to help build affordable housing in this community. Some of the fees that our developers pay, the in lieu fees, we use to partner with these nonprofits to get housing built. Other examples of non-market housing include co-ops, and I'm certainly open to, you know, considering that. I do agree that housing is a human right, and we need to do better in terms of getting affordable housing done, but we are also sort of constrained in it and are working on building more. Thank you.
Kathy. And Gabe, can you finish us up with that question, please?
Thank you. So my colleague Kathy did mention a couple of the options that we currently are implementing in Petaluma that I would love to expand. So the Housing Land Trust allows for an affordable option to purchase a home, build equity, and then in theory, be able to recycle that home as you build equity, you sell and move on and take the equity with you to another home. And it allows for a mortgage based on your income level. Currently, as a renter here in town, right, we have a cap at 10% on what the increase can be year to year. As a state employee, I just got a 5% pay cut for the next 2 years. Yet my rent will continue to go up. So offering more options for our nonprofit housing partners to build housing that locks in at a lower increase or income-based increase for rent is important. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. And Blake, if you could please read to us the second question of this section.
What is the connection between climate change and housing? And how does transportation play a part in this? What is the connection between climate change and housing? And how does transportation play a part in this?
Okay, thanks, Blake. And we'll start with the answers with Kathy Miller, followed by Gabe Kearney. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. So there's obviously a direct correlation between climate change and housing. The biggest, greenhouse gas emissions are automobiles. And so we want to build housing close to transit. We want to build housing close to jobs. We want to get people out of their cars or at least into electric cars as best we can. And so obviously transportation plays a huge role in that, and how we get people around and how we get people around safely and without having to drive. So it's all clearly very interrelated and has to be considered. And it's something that we'll look at very closely as we go into our next general plan update. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Gabe, you're up next, followed by Robert Conklin. Go ahead, Gabe.
So affordable housing close to where the job centers are is important in order for us to get people off of the roads and out of cars and onto public transit or other means of transportation. When you have folks that have to commute all the way from Vallejo and Solano County to come into Sonoma County to work, it creates more greenhouse gas emissions. It's well documented that we have folks that drive from way outside the county to be able to work here, but because they can't afford to live here. So creating more affordable housing options for those folks is important. Also creating or expanding upon the Sonoma Clean Power subsidies for people to purchase more fuel efficient cars like plug-in hybrids and things like that is also an important option. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. And Robert Conklin, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Go ahead, Robert.
Some of our lowest wage workers travel the most miles to seek better wages and opportunities. Transit-based housing, dense housing units next to public transportation is definitely the answer. The more miles you drive in the car, wear and tear, it costs money, and it's an impact on the environment, and is any way we can reduce the vehicle miles traveled is the solutions we need to be looking into.
Thank you, Robert. And Dennis, you're up next, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection between climate change and transportation. We need to make sure that everyone who works in Petaluma can decide to live here, can afford to live here. That's clear. Housing is a human right. I think that there are many correlations between housing and transportation. We need to emphasize transit-oriented development, as others have said. We need to decrease the number of cars on the road by uncoupling parking from rent. We need more EV chargers and fewer garages in most of our developments.
Thank you, Dennis. And Lizzie, you're up next, followed by Brian Barnacle.
This is so tightly interconnected, and we're absolutely not going to get anywhere until we stop building McMansions on the outskirts of town with 2-car garages that require folks to get there by 2 cars and call it, transit-oriented development, which it's not. It's transit adjacent, and that is not good enough. We absolutely need to be designing housing connected to transportation, so folks that are working here, going to school here, relying on services, can go to a library and get a book, can go to a store and get a pack of diapers without having to get in their car and drive 20 minutes to a store. So really, when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about connected housing that affords an affordable lifestyle. And we're talking about it across the board in multi-generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie. And Brian, you're up next, followed by Susan Kirks. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, because we're sort of become a wealthy bedroom community of the Bay Area, housing and transportation are probably our 2 largest sources of emission. So if we're going to do anything for climate mitigation and reducing our carbon emissions, both of those things need to be addressed in tandem. The equity pieces of that are significant because, as many people have already said, there's people living outside of our community that can't afford to live inside the city limits. And I really like what Lizzie said, that when we're building housing, we're not just plopping boxes on the ground, we're building communities. And if we want to get people out of their cars and we want to help them move safely places, then that's where you need a designer's eye. You need to have people that actually know how to create community and not just rubber stamp bad projects.
And Susan, go ahead. Susan, you're muted.
Thank you. Climate change and action related to climate change will inform all of our decisions for housing and transportation. So low carbon green growth is the mantra for climate action. With everybody else in the region, we'll be reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to electrify vehicular transportation. We need to build housing that has electrification at its center. And in doing that, we need to consider quality of life for everyone, opportunities and how we move, bicycle, ped, transit, affordable, and how we connect everything in our community with the housing that needs to be newly visioned, affordable, and thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. Thanks, Susan. We know 45 seconds is pretty quick. Blake, if you could read us our 3rd question for this section, please.
What is the connection between racial justice and housing justice? What is the connection between racial justice and housing justice?
Okay, thank you, Blake. I know some of you have touched on this already, but we'll start with Robert Conklin, followed by Susan Kirks.
There we go. I kind of touched on it last one where I said the lowest wage or lower wage workers. I hate to say it and I hate to admit it, but a lot of those lower wage workers happen to be minorities. They travel out of the city to, seek better wages just so they can live in Petaluma. When we make it affordable around the board for, as best we can, it brings some equity to the whole situation. Petaluma is getting expensive, and it's kind of it's kind of a catch-22 on whatever we do to make it more affordable for people.
Thank you, Robert. And Susan, you're next, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I thought I was muted. Well, we have a really long history in our country related to preventing persons who are not white from living in certain areas of communities, redlining. I mean, the history is long, it's true, and it's there. And so housing justice means equal opportunity. Housing justice means more than equal opportunity. It means making up for the wrongs of our society in the past to persons who are not white. And I think in Petaluma, because we're a mid-sized city, we have a wonderful opportunity to create.
Lizzie Wallack, followed by Brian Barnacle. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to say that historically speaking, racial justice, economic justice, and housing justice have always been so deeply intertwined. And what is so important right now is we need new voices to our council that are going to understand the complexities of why they have historically been so intertwined and take a step toward making that change. So we can no longer value engineer a bike lane out of a development. We can no longer say no to a development because it doesn't have two-car parking in it. We can no longer push affordable housing to the outskirts because that is just perpetuating this injustice here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. And Brian, you're up next, followed by Gabe Kearney. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm glad Lizzie mentioned economic justice. I looked at the PG&E settlement community input, and what struck me was just how different the Spanish-speaking respondents responded compared to the non-Spanish-speaking respondents. And overwhelmingly, the Spanish-speaking respondents' number one and number two issues were financial assistance and affordable housing. And those were not even close to what the non-Spanish-speaking people responded with. That's a great example. I just saw that last night. And so when you look at the intersections of racial justice and housing justice, you have to also include economic justice, as many of the prior speakers have, and realize that we have done, we're not exempt from those issues here.
Thanks, Brian. Gabe, you're up next, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Go ahead.
So our country does have a horrible history of very racist practices that we must overcome. We do need to continue to make sure that we build and approve projects that afford the opportunity for all income levels in our community to live here. And through that, I think we will see a more just society, but we do have a long way to go. It's not going to happen overnight. And we do need to make sure that we look at affordability of how affordable is it to stay in the house and create a way for people to stay in the homes, like our rent stabilization program, if there are challenges that people face because of healthcare needs or any other needs that come up throughout the month. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. And Dennis, followed by Kathy Miller. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah. That's another reason that Black Lives Matter to me is because this redlining history, that is part of our history of institutional racism, which has contributed greatly to the wealth inequality and inequity between folks of different colors in our society. And I think that this gets back to the general plan. And if we can make our zoning in the new general plan more flexible, this will allow housing units for different income levels in the same neighborhoods, such that folks are more intermingled and there's more equity in the neighborhood feel of the town.
Thank you, Dennis. And Kathy, go ahead.
So definitely the country has a long history of racial injustice and you know, we're continuing to try and fix that. And it's been a lengthy process and we still have a long way to go. A lot of our lower income residents and employees of businesses here are persons of color, and building affordable housing helps. And, you know, we're doing that on two different fronts. We're both partnering with affordable housing developers, and we're also requiring affordable housing as part of market rate housing, which gets you into that neighborhood where it is of all income levels, which I think is incredibly important. So we'll continue to do both.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you to all the candidates. Those were some great answers. We will now hand it back over to Erin, who will do another poll for us.
Thank you, everyone, again. I'll share my screen here one more time. So our next poll question is, will you vote yes on California State Proposition 15, schools and communities first? One of the things about NBOP is that, you know, we can't endorse candidates, but we can support propositions, and we can do the hard work that's needed to get the word out on these by working with such organizations as like Power California Action. And, you know, particularly this prop, you know, we want to close some of those loopholes in 13 so that we can reclaim about 12 billion every year for our schools and local communities. We want to close those corporate property tax loopholes. So again, you know, we're hoping to get the word out to vote yes on this prop. How would you vote? Looks like we got a couple more trickling in. While we'll let it up for a little bit longer, and then we'll be closing it down. But again, thank you.
I'll just take a second to also make a note that we do have a group of youth who are working on this proposition. And so if you're interested in volunteering to support the local work that's happening, that's being done by NBOP's Latinx Student Congress. And you can reach out to us at NBOP if you want to find out about opportunities to phone bank or text bank, ways to get involved to get this passed. We've been working on it all year, and our youth are super engaged and think it's so important.
Okay, thanks again. Pass it back.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Amber. All right, so we will now be showing a brief NBOP video on housing justice to give our hardworking interpreter a break, and for you all to get up and stretch or take a quick bathroom break if needed. But Erin, again, please.
Please join us again in 4 or 5 minutes. So candidates, if you want to make a note, that would be 7:44. Please make sure you're back in time to get started again.
My name is Sierra Don Downey. I'm from Petaluma, California. I am a worker, I'm a renter, and I'm a community organizer in the climate justice movement.
Hello, I am Kevin. I'm from Los Angeles, recently moved to Sonoma County, and I'm a renter.
Hello everybody, my name is Chad Bola. I am a renter and a lifelong resident here in Santa Rosa.
In October 2017, I moved into this one-room cabin, which is about 250 square feet, with my adoring partner. It has been a refuge for us. We've endured the fires and flood. We're now in the midst of a pandemic, and the reality of just how blessed we really are has come full circle. My sister, who in November 2019 was transferred into a room and board facility in Vallejo from San Bernardino. She was visiting us over spring break when the news came for us all to shelter in place.
Within a 1-week span, my sister lost her job, my mom lost her job, we got the shelter-in-place orders. I was furloughed that Friday. I don't know when or if I'll be back to that job.
I am witnessing food banks increasing their production, increasing demands, and I'm witnessing families being disrupted from their everyday lives. They have not been able to handle an emergency like this with their savings. We've been working for really low-wage jobs in our community, and the rent is increasing all around the country.
The room and board facility that my sister was living in, it was operated by a couple whose primary goal of operating it was for the income. It offered 7 beds, and each bed could get anywhere from $1,500 to $2,300 a month. Due to her disability, her bed is paid for by the state of California, $2,300.
I'm fortunate at this moment to have a place to shelter that's affordable rent. I'm also fortunate to have an income at this time. So I'm thinking about all the people less fortunate than myself that are really dealing with some very visceral fears around whether or not they're going to be able to pay rent come May 1st. And what does that mean?
I'm really worried about the current moratorium on evictions because we need debt forgiveness, or else our community is not going to be resilient throughout this state of emergency, and we might end up having a really much higher homeless population.
My landlady called all of her housemates and was like, I am so sorry, but because I'm elderly, because I have pre-existing conditions, I'm at a greater risk for getting COVID-19 and dying, and so y'all have to move out. This was completely unexpected at the drop of a hat, and like overnight you have to find a different living situation. I feel incredibly lucky that I have family nearby with whom I can move in for the short term, but what about my housemate who doesn't have anyone nearby? Where does he go?
The blessing in all of this has been that my sister's caseworker personally asked us if we could provide shelter for my sister during the shelter-in-place mandate. Of course we received her. She sleeps in a tent under a carport, while the house in Vallejo receives $2,300 a month for her bedroom that no one's sleeping in. We share our dwelling knowing she's safer with us. We walk around our neighborhood, surrounded by properties that, although they're well maintained, they sit empty. There's summer rentals, and most property owners have other homes elsewhere.
Cancel the rent.
Cancel mortgages.
Cancel debt.
Homes for all.
Thank you, and welcome back. Our next group of questions center around immigration justice. Immigrant communities are deeply rooted in Sonoma County's social fabric. Refuge reflects NBOP's commitment to upholding the rights of immigrants in Sonoma County in areas including work, education, housing, and emergency response. Alongside other efforts, NBOP organizes an Immigrant Defense Task Force, which following the fires of 2017 submitted recommendations for Sonoma County disaster planning, and in 2019 followed up with a disaster response report card. The following questions address candidates' plans to uphold immigration justice and address structural racism and other discrimination. Anne Marie Daniels of the Sonoma County Black Coalition will now ask 3 questions about immigration justice. Go ahead, Anne.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'll read the questions twice as the other question askers have done. The first question goes, what plans do you have to change the fact that racial profiling negatively affects immigrant members of all ages in our community? Again, what plans do you have to change the fact that racial profiling negatively affects immigrant members of all ages in our community?
Thank you, Anne. And we will start with Lizzie Wallack, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Go ahead, Lizzie.
Thank you. I think that, first and foremost, when we're talking about racial profiling, we're talking about a real need for
how we do things in our community. When you recognize the people that you're you're working with as an equal, you're more likely to treat them as an equal. And so we need to make sure that we continue to do a better job at recruiting more diverse talent to come and work for the city of Petaluma. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. And go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, racial profiling is illegal and morally wrong. I know the last few officers, out of a few of the last few officers are bilingual and from the Latinx community. I think police, I know there's Measure P going on that for a law enforcement oversight committee. I'd like to see one on a grassroots level where law enforcement and leaders of the BIPOC community get together and express the problems. So there's somebody that the BIPOC community can trust and listen to, and kind of be a go-between between law enforcement and their community. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And Brian Barnacle, you're up.
For me, it starts with listening to stories and understanding the way that people are profiled. I think it's easy for us to envision what that might look like, but as a white person, I know it never really hit me until I started reading and listening. And so I think what Susan said, we need to absolutely continue with listening circles. Bias training is part of it, but we need to put real life experiences in there that are within our community, and hold the mirror up to people so that they can see the things that they don't even understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And Anne-Marie, if you would please read question number 2.
Okay, so question number 2 goes as follows. Which specific policy action do you plan to take to dismantle institutional racism and white supremacy within the city and schools? Again, which specific policy actions do you plan to take to dismantle institutional racism and white supremacy within the city and schools?
Thank you, Anne. And Robert, you're up first, followed by Brian Barnacle. Go ahead, Robert.
I'm not really sure that, yeah, as a city council member, that's within your power, but yeah, I mean, basically I can't think of any specific policy, but we need to, bring the community together and get all parties involved at the table discussing what we can do, and if there's any specific policy that you might come to mind, just my ears are open. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And Brian, followed by Susan Kirks. Go ahead.
2 things jump out at me. One, that no payment of in-lieu fees would be allowed if the resulting housing was moved farther away from transit and services. I think that's an easy one that we could implement. The second one is when we look at our staff reports, the city has done a good job of putting a section in there for climate impacts or environmental impacts, but we really haven't thoroughly thought through the environmental justice and the intersectionality. And I think putting that in a staff report and actually requiring staff to think through those things is a good way to sort of start to change the culture within City Hall and within the planning department about the EJ issues.
Thank you, Brian. And Susan Kirks, you're up, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Oh, I wasn't muted. I think I'd like to use my 45 seconds to focus on community safety, because that's a really major area of where our institutional racism seems to rest in this country. Quickly, I would favor a ballot measure for an oversight commission to review the community safety function in Petaluma and to oversee all of the actions of our community safety function. And I would also review the entire police department staffing and make changes in that to reflect the types of responses we need professionally. Oh, is that all? I'm sorry. With schools, I'd like to see the 1619 project in our schools. I'd like to
Lizzie Wallack, you're up next, followed by Gabe Kearney.
Thank you very much. I feel like 45 seconds on this topic is extremely fast. And I think that if I could speak less specifically to specific measures and action items, and more generally that we absolutely have to be looking at all projects that we're moving forward with the priorities being environmental and social justice. And we need to start to think about everybody in our community when we're talking about development, housing, policing, and schooling. And so when we talk about oversight committees, I absolutely support Measure P. And I think that we really need to figure out how to do this both at the city leadership level and at the school level. Thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie. Gabe, you're up next, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Go ahead, Gabe.
Thank you very much. So I'm open to looking at any policy that the city has in making sure that it is not racist in its inherent state. I also think that we need to look at our charter and update our charter to make it more reflective of 2020. Our charter has not been updated in the past 25 plus years. And so there are many opportunities for us to look at the charter and what is the basic framework of our city and how we can improve upon it. As far as schools, I'm more than willing to partner with the Petaluma City Schools and the other school districts in our city. But as a city council member, I have no jurisdiction over the school districts and what they do. But again, more than willing to partner with them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabe. Dennis, followed by Kathy Miller. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah. I think that the city council, in every decision it makes, in addition to considering the issues related to climate change, needs to consider issues of equity and institutional racism. Diversity requires more than just saying the words, has to be seen as part of the vision of the city, and leaders must be supportive in every way. We must not forget other differently abled folks and LGBTQ citizens, residents, and we have to challenge all involved in selection and hiring to be aware of institutional racism and to be willing to ask questions of their superiors if they're in doubt.
Thank you, Dennis. And Kathy, go ahead.
Thanks. So, I support the dismantling of institutional racism. I support more diversity in our hiring in our city. We have made a concentrated effort to recruit police officers who are of color, because we recognized that our police department didn't reflect the full diversity in our community. So I think that's very important. As for the piece about schools, again, we as city council members don't have any control over the schools. But as Councilmember Kearney said, I would be happy to partner with the schools to work on programs to eliminate institutional racism in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And back to Anne Marie for a final question at this section.
Thank you guys all for trying to tackle these big questions in 45 seconds, but we have to do it at least 45 seconds at a time. And thank you for everyone that's tuning in, because all politics are local and it's important that we participate. So the final question that I have to read goes as follows. How are low-income wage earners impacted differently by climate change and the pandemic? So again, how are low-income wage earners impacted differently by climate change and the pandemic?
Thank you, Anne Marie. We are grateful to have you here tonight. We will start this one with Dennis Pocekay, followed by Kathy Miller. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes. Low-wage workers are always more affected by any disaster, any pandemic than folks that are not low-wage earners. our low-wage earners on the front lines during this pandemic need to choose at times between going to work sick or staying home and losing their income for that day or longer. And so that's why it's very important that we have that we pass emergency paid sick leave, paid family leave, and as well as protection against eviction for
on their laptop. They're also impacted differently by climate change because, again, these are folks that are not able to afford to live in the community where they work. So they're traveling long distances, and you know, they're impacting the.
Thank you, Kathy. And Lizzie, you're up, followed by Robert Conklin.
Thank you. Yes, you know, I think some good points were made, and where I would like to extend it is that the most effect, you know, when we're talking about lack of healthcare, we're talking about lack of actual infrastructural support for our lowest wage workers in a time of a global pandemic and climate change when our land is burning. So when we talk about no access or very little access to healthcare, when we talk about no access or very limited access to schooling or childcare, you know, to housing security, to transportation security, and then just point blank to money of jobs worked. So really, we need to talk about an overarching infrastructural effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. And Robert, followed by Brian Barnacle. Go ahead, Robert.
Personally, I mean, I'm not necessarily a low wage worker, but I experienced this at my own employment where if you call in sick, you are required to stay off 10 days and you have to make a decision, make that money or tough it out. But the problem is, you know, you're at risk of infecting other people and bringing it home to your family. And a lot of employers now, I mean, including Memorial Hospital, aren't providing the correct PPE for their employees. And, you know, employers aren't doing the right thing. And we definitely need protections for that, such as, you know, rental protection, mortgage protection, and paid sick leave and time off.
Thank you, Robert. Brian, followed by Susan Kirks. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think people have really touched on the impacts of in the workplace. It's also at the home, and the inability to, you know, if you're a low wage earner, you're probably more likely to live in overcrowded situations, and that increases your likelihood of spreading the virus. Moreover, you probably don't have spare money to upgrade your filtration systems in your house, and so the smoke is coming in and wreaking havoc in ways that it wouldn't if you had the resources. So in so many different ways, our low wage workers are going to be, you know, impacted by climate change going forward, and the pandemic is just a great example of what we're going to see in the years to come.
Thank you, Brian. And Susan, you're up, followed by Gabe Kearney. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. I guess what I'd like to add is really just thinking about the question that was asked is the stressors, the really overwhelming stressors just for survival. And in both instances, the choices of, you know, do you stay home with your child when you know you have to go to work or you will not be able to eat? And I think that, you know, our community does a really good job of providing support in certain areas for food security, Sometimes for shelter, I think we could do a much better job. And I just think that nationally, we need national leadership and then to connect to that for improving the.
Thank you, Susan. And Gabe, you're up.
Thank you. So if we look at lower wage earners and where they live in our community, one of the places that many live is in Lakeville apartments. And if you look, there's a food desert in that area of town. And so that has an impact on people's health overall, right? So if the closest store is the Adobe liquor store and you have to pay twice as much for fresh fruit, that's going to be a problem. And we see higher rates of diabetes and other diseases in the communities that live in lower income parts of communities throughout the United States. Access to affordable healthcare or access to healthcare is also a big issue that we as a city council cannot oversee. But hopefully when we see change at the White House and in the leadership in the federal level, we can get affordable healthcare for every American. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe, and thank you, candidates. Erin will now initiate our final poll.
Erin, you might be muted.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I clicked it and it didn't want to go. So thank you everybody for looking out. So our last poll question, as you can see, is will you vote yes on Sonoma County Measure P? This will increase oversight of Sonoma County Sheriff's Office and improve local policing for everyone, but especially for people whose faces look like the ones on our screen right now. Again, it gives existing office the power it needs to conduct investigations, subpoena power, legally required cooperation from the sheriff's office, authority to access body camera footage, and necessary funding to do that job. So always important things to have access to when we're dealing with oversight. So again, voting yes on Sonoma County Measure P. And we'll be closing polls. Looks like everybody's coming in.
I'm going to jump in again here.
Yay.
And say that we are also phone banking and text banking for Measure P. So if you want to get involved on a local measure that's going to make a difference no matter what happens at the national level, this is going to make a direct difference to people in our community, to your neighbors, to your friends. Reach out to us at NBOP and we'll get you plugged in for those phone banks.
Thank you, Amber. And thank you.
Thank you, Erin and Amber. That was insightful. Our final questions focus on community. A commitment to community is a commitment to equity, to equal rights across Sonoma County's diverse communities, and to the right for all members of our community to have a seat at the table and have their voices heard. As a multi-issue organization, NBOP recognizes that issues of social justice intersect across a web of structural inequities and works to unite community members in building grassroots power to dismantle them. The following questions address additional issues of concern to Petaluma's communities. And we will have Corey Johnson from NBOP Petaluma, and she will now read our final 3 questions for final statements. Corey, take it away.
Hi, thank you for hanging in there. The first question is, how can we support access to tech in every household during the pandemic since schools can't do it alone? Again, that's how can we support access to tech in every household during the pandemic since schools can't do it alone?
Thank you, Corey. We will start off with Brian Barnacle, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Brian.
I think the city can come through with some cash on that. I was an advocate of, when we were approving our budget, of creating a dedicated fund to make sure that we were there for our community in whatever way we could be. And I think I still feel that way. I still feel like if you want to show me where your priorities are, show me where you spend your time and where you spend your money. And we should have a fund that is there to make sure that children are not left behind in the chaos of this pandemic.
Thank you. Dennis Pocekay, followed by Susan Kirks. Dennis.
Yes, I'd like to start where Brian left off there and add a little bit in terms of, again, I think every issue like this is in part a city council problem. I think that if the sales tax passes, that we should view that flexibly, and this would be an instance where we need to move some money around to help with this if there's no other way to do it.
Thank you. Susan, followed by Gabe Kearney. Susan.
Sorry, I was muted. I think this is a really good opportunity to see where leadership comes in, because this is something that's unexpected that has occurred, and yet another thing with the pandemic. And I think as a leader, elected official, that there are resources for us. And I think that we could reach out to Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation. We could reach out to other tech companies here in the Bay Area. There are many, to request partnerships, to request assistance, to request donations. And it takes tenacity. It takes the willingness to reach out and continue to reach out and obtain solutions when maybe the
Thank you. Gabe Kearney, followed by Kathy Miller. Gabe?
Thank you so much for the opportunity on this one. One of the opportunities that we have is looking at our franchise fee or franchise program with Comcast and our service providers, and looking at how Comcast, for example, has a program that if you meet certain criteria, you can pay, I believe it's $10 a month for internet. But looking at how we can utilize the money that we get in franchise fees from Comcast to help create a fund to pay for those internet fees for families that can't afford it. That's one example of an idea that we could implement, especially now that almost every child in Petaluma gets a device to take home with them from their schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kathy, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Kathy?
Thank you. So, yeah, we've worked, since this has begun, we've worked as a city with our local internet providers to increase bandwidth. Comcast has done, due to, not just lack of access to the internet, but slower internet that is slowing down further because everybody's trying to do their Zoom school and their Zoom work. And so, we've worked with Comcast to try and get that bandwidth up. The franchise fees are a good thing that we can look at. As everybody is aware, the city of Petaluma does not have a very robust budget. So we are always looking for ways that we can partner with community members to try and achieve results that we couldn't necessarily achieve with the financial.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say that I agree with what Brian and Dennis both had to say, and to add on to that a little bit further, in saying that along with setting aside, if Measure U passes, setting aside some money and helping to find money, whether it's with cash dollars or partnerships, is that beyond just giving the money to support this, I would advocate heavily for the infrastructural support in how to figure out how to navigate the system within your home on your devices, how to get set up most efficiently. And then also in turn, hopefully we're getting more folks to join our council meetings, because if we have devices and wired homes, then hopefully we'll get more partnership within our city governance. And I think that that's a huge priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Can you hear me? No? Perfect. Okay. In this day and age, I mean, internet is a utility just as important as water or gas going to the home. I'd like to look into is any way possible to have a public option of in the city. I know we have like the dig once policy, and it's kind of created a monopoly with Comcast. AT&T's like behind the times. I know Sonic's trying to push in with their fiber optic lines, but we need to, especially with the infrastructure, if we do dig, we need to be able to easily access the lines to get them to the places they need to go. And definitely every household should have internet. It's just as important as a phone line or water.
Thank you, Corey. You can go ahead with the second question.
Okay. How will you bring youth voices into local governance? Once again, how will you bring youth voices into local governance?
All right, we will begin this with Susan Kirks, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Susan.
Thank you. We have a really wonderful youth commission, and the Climate Action Commission has just approved having a youth member. And so those are structurally within city government, two ways to hear our youth voices and to support our youth voices. And I just spoke to a senior economics class at Casa Grande High School yesterday, and those students were very motivated, and many of them are first-time voters. So I think that for us as elected officials, I certainly would continue the relationships I already have with two nonprofit organizations I lead that are grassroots and have youth involvement there.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, Dennis, followed by Robert Conklin.
Yes, I served on the Youth Commission some years ago. I'm going to say 7 to 9 years ago, I did a term on the Youth Commission. And in thinking about that, and also in conversations I've had with several members of our several trustees on the school board, I think something that I talked about 2 years ago, and I'm still talking about, is meeting with school representatives and students at the times that they're selecting their projects, their senior projects in which they have to do some good in the world. I'd like to see more of them connected with elected officials at the city council and other departments.
All right, Robert, followed by Brian Barnacle.
Yes, we do have a youth committee. It's a very great program. Not saying that any of the elected officials don't go to visit the high school government classes, but I've spoken. I know I was reached out to by a Casa Grande teacher and was speaking to a Petaluma teacher about speaking on the matters, which I think is great. We should definitely get them interested early, because if not, it's just going to be YouTube and TikTok videos unless we get them interested in local government. So just answers the schools.
All right, Brian, followed by Gabe.
Well, I think it starts by spending more time reaching out to the youth, and as much time as you do talking to the youth as you do to developers. That's where I'd start. And then I think we need to engage them in the project process. We need to get their feedback on development projects and go to schools and have them contribute to the way that our community grows. They're the ones who are going to encounter this stuff, and they're the ones who are impacted by it for years and years. And they should be consulted just like anyone else and included in the process.
I'll go ahead and jump right in. Thank you. 1997, I started coming to city council meetings. It was my first council meeting was there. I was there to speak on behalf of LGBT rights and fighting for domestic partner benefits for our employees in the city of Petaluma, and a domestic partner registry for anyone that lived or worked in Petaluma. And so I think it's important that we make it easy and accessible for youth to come and speak at the council meetings, encourage them to be there at the table, encourage involvement in other committees, not just the Climate Action Commission, but getting youth commission and youth voices on other committees, I think is important as well. And look forward to continuing to listening to the youth of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kathy, followed by Lizzie Wallack.
So as the parent of 2 children in college, I am very well acquainted with our youth and working with our youth to get them engaged. And I will tell you that the youth in our community are engaged. I've served several terms on the Youth Commission as the council liaison. I have done the Law in Schools program for years. And I also have been speaking to Casa Grande government classes for the last 8 years. Recently, last Friday and again last Monday. So, you know, getting the youth involved is important. I think they are involved. I think they're engaged right now. They're far more engaged than they were, say, 4 or 5 years ago. And I support their engagement, and I think we need to be listening to them. Because
I am so thankful for the youth in our community. The future is looking much brighter with them helping to lead the way. I think that, you know, a lot of what folks have said before me resonates, and to take that a step further is when we're having council meetings and when we're having, you know, general plan outreach visioning sessions, I think that these are tremendous opportunities to engage with the youth community in Petaluma. And then to take it a step further, you know, we have folks at our schools that their sole jobs are to know every single name of the student on the campus and their little sibling and their caretaker that brings them to school every day. So if we can adopt that mentality as city leaders, we'll be in good shape.
All right, thank you. Corey, our final question, please.
Okay, the last question is, would you support amending Petaluma's anti-discrimination employment ordinance to explicitly include protections based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression? I'll repeat that. Would you support amending Petaluma's anti-discrimination employment ordinance to explicitly include protections based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression?
Thank you. All right, Gabe Kearney will be starting us off, followed by Robert Conklin.
Throwing the softball question to the only gay one on the panel. That's always great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So yes, I do approve or in support expanding that. As we saw in the first week of session of the Supreme Court, our LGBT rights are going to be under attack if we get more conservative members of the panel of the Supreme Court. And so we need to fight and continue to fight to make sure that LGBT members of our community feel safe, welcome, and at home here in Petaluma. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, followed by Kathy Miller.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually very shocked that there isn't protection already. I mean, we, you know, the Civil Rights Act was 50 years ago. I'm pretty sure that we need to get with the times. And yes, like Gabe said, you know, our Supreme Court is shifting, and the LGBTQ rights are under attack. And I would do anything to champion for that cause and help people out wherever I could.
Thank you. Kathy, followed by Lizzie Wallack.
Kathy, you're muted.
Sorry. Absolutely. The changes that are going on with the Supreme Court right now are alarming. And, you know, what we're going to need to do is pass legislation that overrides that. And I support that legislation and definitely support doing what we can to expand LGBTQ rights in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Lizzie, followed by Brian Barnacle.
Absolutely, 100% yes, 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 yes. And then to take it a step further, something I think that where we can also be in discussion with our excellent school board is to start talking about overlapping spaces and jurisdictions of city spaces and school spaces. So we can start to look at how to make various communities in Petaluma feel safe and comfortable and welcome when they're partaking. And for example, we should talk about non-gendered bathrooms at City Hall and non-gendered bathrooms at playgrounds, as we're having this discussion in the schools as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Brian?
Yes, of course. I agree with all the prior speakers. I also think we need to be looking at our campaigning practices law to close the loophole for out-of-state robocalling so that we don't have rogue council members skirting state law the way they skirt the general plan, spreading misleading information and interrupting people at night. Instead of sound bites, I would challenge Kathy Miller, Mike Healy, and Gabe Kearney to join me for a 1-hour debate where we can talk about Corona, we can talk about traffic they've created, we can talk about budget and all their developer giveaways. How about we meet and we actually give people what they need, which is true information instead of lies. Thank you.
Dennis?
I'm also in total support of these protections because trans lives matter as well. And I believe that we need to do all we can to protect folks with different gender expression and or identities. And I think that all restrooms in public places should be for anyone to use. And we need to be sure we're doing everything we can.
Thank you. And finally, Susan Kirks, you're up.
Thank you. Okay, this one I can answer within 45 seconds. Yes, that's my answer. And I would be willing to initiate and lead the way on this with the City Council, with any members of NBOP or your co-sponsoring groups who would like to work together to bring this forward. And thank you for the question.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, candidates, for answering those questions. We will now move into our closing statements. Again, random order. We will start with Kathy Miller, followed by Gabe Kearney. Go ahead, Kathy, 45 seconds.
Thanks. So I want to thank everybody for putting together this forum. It's been a pleasure to be here. We're living in difficult times. We have a climate crisis, we have a pandemic, we have wildfires, and we're facing a huge financial deficit as a city. And we don't need people on the council who are going to take a year or 2 years to come up to speed, people who don't attend council meetings, people who aren't doing their homework. We need people who can hit the ground running. And I can hit the ground running in January because I've been doing this for the last 8 years. We don't need people who are suing the city to be on our city council. It's a massive conflict of interest and it shows extremely poor judgment. So I ask for your vote and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And we'll have Gabe next, followed by Brian Barnacle.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to answer the questions tonight, and hopefully folks have been able to hear the different perspectives that some of the council members and candidates bring to the table. I've been serving this community on the City Council for 9 years. Prior to that, I served the county on the Mental Health Board and the Community Development Committee. I would like to continue serving this community that I love so much, and hopefully when you get your ballot in the mail, you make the choice to vote for me and re-elect me to the Petaluma City Council. Thank you very much for your time this evening and for taking the time to hear the different candidates and what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. And we have Brian up next, followed by Susan Kirks. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you to NBOP Petaluma and to all the community groups who participated in this. It's great to see the community coming together and hosting these forums. I am running because we need change, because we can't tolerate hitting the ground running with more of the same. We have significant inequities that have been created by our councils, and they're not going to be fixed by our councils. As you just heard, they're going to hit the ground running with more of the same. We've got traffic problems, we've got housing problems, we've got budget problems, and none of them are going to be solved with more of the same. If you want different results, you have to change the input. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care of each other, and good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And Susan, you're up next, followed by Lizzie Wallack. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Oh, I'm up. Thank you for organizing the forum tonight and for the opportunity for all of us to participate. I'd like to answer actually the part of the first question to take the rest of my 40 seconds, which is how do I show Black Lives Matter so your members maybe get to know me a little bit better. I've been volunteering with former First Lady Michelle Obama's initiative, When We All Vote, for the last year, continued up to today, and will continue to voting to November 3rd. Our voices all matter, and we can bring change, and we can bring change nationally, statewide, and locally. And we need change. We need all of our voices to count and all of our votes.
Thank you, Susan. Lizzie, you're up next, followed by Robert Conklin.
Thank you so much to all of you for hosting us tonight. I am so grateful. This is a really big election. The time for change is now. We need new voices, fresh thinking, and creative ideas to get us through to this next stage in this master plan. We have significant housing deficits, high transportation needs, and unfortunately, we're just in the beginning of COVID. With me, I bring the excitement and the compassion, the knowledge of my experience working in architecture, as well as being a mother of 2 small children currently in our Petaluma City schools. Tonight, I ask for your vote. Now's the time for change. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Robert, up next, followed by Dennis Pocekay. Go ahead, Robert.
Thank you for having me. You know, I've lived in this town all my life. I don't know anything different than this town, and I want to see it, you know, grow and flourish in the best way possible. We're under the COVID lockdown. Economic times are looking very bleak, and you know, we need people who, you know, can voice the opinion of, you know, working class families in Petaluma. Fortunately, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working on and helping the BIPOC community candidates in other cities to get their voice out there and heard. And I've probably done that more than my own campaign, but I'm here to just speak for the average, ordinary working person, and hopefully that view's represented on the council.
Thank you, Robert. And Dennis, can you please finish up for us? Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to first thank all the groups that co-hosted this forum and everyone who attended. It is time for a change. The incumbents want you to excuse their actions by saying that in most other places they would be considered liberals. Their track record over the past 8 years says something different. So why should you vote for me? I'm tenacious and will work hard for the common good. I champion the right for everyone to live in a fair and equitable society. I believe housing is a human right, and I truly believe that we are all in this together. To see my endorsements, please go to my website, pocekayforcouncil2020.com, and remember to vote for me when your ballot arrives. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. And thank you to all the candidates for being here tonight. We know these were some hard questions, and we commend you for discussing these important issues on the spot so that the public here today can get to know you a little better and get a sense of who can best represent our diverse community here in Petaluma while sitting on the city council. I also just want to reiterate that the NBOP does not endorse candidates, and this forum has provided a way for people in our community to hear from the candidates themselves. I'd also like to take a moment to thank NBOP Petaluma for organizing this event, along with all of our co-sponsors, including, in no particular order, North Bay LGBTQI Families, Indivisible Petaluma, Sonoma County Commission on Human Rights, No Gas Here, Bike Petaluma, Friends of the Petaluma River, the Raucous Roosters, Sunrise Movement Sonoma County, Petaluma Tide, and 350 Petaluma. Also, a big thank you to our interpreter, Juan Torres. Thank you. To our volunteers, all the tech support and speakers, question askers for all of your valuable time and hard work this evening. And finally, thank you to the public, our community members, for joining us this evening. And one more quick thing before we end, I will pass it back over to Elena one more time for some final information about NBOP's deep democracy and intersectional theory of the work they do in a moment of global crisis. Thank you. Elena.
The North Bay Organizing Project's voter engagement work connects to all of the campaign issues that we've touched on tonight: housing, immigration, and justice for the environment. The communities where we work are the ones most affected by all of these issues. We are using the deep work on democracy to strengthen our narrative that connects all three of these issues to one another and to the larger problems of structural racism, corporate control of our government and economy, and the erosion of the public sphere. We work toward collective liberation by empowering those typically excluded from democracy. If you are interested in getting involved, we have monthly meetings on the second Wednesday of each month from 6:30 till 8 p.m. And you can contact Amber Sobosly at ambo@northbayop.org. And you'll see that up on your screen now. And for more information, please visit our website at northbayop.org. You can also follow us on Instagram at NBOP, or the North Bay Organizing Project-Petaluma Facebook page. We want to thank you all again for sharing your evening with us. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Be well.